Have you ever played Project Zomboid and wondered what the game would be like without zombies?
Are in Project
Can you
Zomboid?
kill
I'm here
every
to
single
answer
zombie
that
in Project
question by
Zomboid?
killing
Well,
every single
yeah,
one of
technically
them.
you could turn off zombie respawns.
Well, can we? For years I tried my hand at the ultimate challenge, a kill all zombies run. I've been mildly successful until my save inevitably gets corrupted. But after talking with some of my friends who know I play like a crackhead, I decided it was time to give it another shot. But this time, it's not just me taking on the challenge, it's him. Meet Sergio Vargas, our victim, and this time, I'm making it even harder. Here's the catch. Hordes, low loot, terrible vehicle condition, an insane zombie population, pinpoint hearing zombies, burn word and broken leg traits, sprinters. Yeah, I definitely wasn't inspired. And if that wasn't enough, Sergio starts at St. Peregrine's Hospital. He's starving, dehydrated, miserable, and he has 30 days to escape Louisville before its friendly residents peacefully evict him. Now, join me on the story of a Croatian American who declared an absurd war on the undead, a battle that's equal parts madness, desperation, determination, and memes. Without further ado,
Here we go.
what I expected was not this. The thought echoed in Sergio Vargas' mind as he jolted awake, the searing pain from his broken leg and burned skin dragging him out of unconsciousness. A scream outside shattered the silence, but Sergio's gaze was fixed on a flickering TV in the hallway. A fishing show played, its serene waters drawing him in, calming his scattered thoughts. For him, time had stopped. His stomach growled, snapping him back to reality. Glancing around, he realized he was in a hospital. Its walls and floors painted red with blood. Static of the TV buzzed loudly, almost deafening in the oppressive silence. Rummaging through a trash can, he found 2 cans of tomatoes and devoured them ravenously, though they barely satiated his hunger or thirst. Why am I here? Couldn't remember. As he slipped into a pair of medical scrubs, fragments of memory resurfaced. A rifle gripped tightly in his hands, blood-streaked roads, distant screams, machine gun fire, the name West Point. What it meant or where it was, he didn't know. As he swallowed a dose of antibiotics, another scream pierced the air. He had to get out. Yet the question from his dream lingered. What was I expecting? He pushed forward and opened the door to the dark hospital hallway, ready to face whatever lay beyond. Let's take a look at Sergio's traits. Part of the challenge is the brutal early game, where so many things are stacked against him. Sergio was rife with issues that needed immediate attention. Alone and barely holding himself together, survival meant tackling each problem head-on. His first challenge was his frail body, a result of starvation and injury. Sergio's frail body, weighing in at 60 pounds, left him dangerously weak. Regaining his strength meant focusing on high-carb, calorie-dense meals to maintain a surplus. But food alone wouldn't solve his problems. His unfit and weak state meant stamina and strength were at an all-time low. Without improving his fitness, venturing outside the hospital would be suicide. A treadmill he found in the building offered a solution, and Sergio would begin a grueling regimen to rebuild his strength. With some food and a treadmill, he made his way to the other side of the hospital, finding a room to settle until he recovered. The hospital offered a fragile sense of safety, but Sergio's instincts and the blood-curdling screams from earlier warned him to prepare for the inevitable. Despite his weak and feeble body, he pushed himself to gather large, heavy, awkward objects like tables, beds, and vending machines, using them to block stairways and hallways. It was a cruel method, but it would be effective. Finally, his wounds demanded constant attention. His burnt body and broken leg ached relentlessly, leaving him virtually useless. With no one else to rely on, Sergio had no choice but to treat himself. The motions of replacing bandages, cleaning burns, and disinfecting became a grueling routine, consuming most of his time in those early days, but reminded him of something. But he couldn't remember. With so many challenges weighing him down, Sergio's survival act was a balancing. Food, fitness, safety, and wound care all demanded his focus. Though he couldn't fully grasp the scope of what lay beyond the hospital walls, his instincts told him one thing: mistakes wouldn't be forgiven. Sergio finished barricading the hospital's hallways and entry points. The work had been grueling, but something deep inside him had urged him to do it. As he secured each door and dragged furniture into place, he grabbed TVs from the rooms he passed, hauling them back to the dim medical room, one by one. With the doors and hallway secure, he arranged the TVs in an orderly line. Each was tuned to a different channel as he flipped through the static and flickering images, trying to piece together what was happening. The steady hum of the screens filled the silence. The methodical task calmed him in a way he didn't fully understand, as if each screen offered a small piece of the control he craved. His ears perked up at one broadcast. The anchor spoke frantically about the situation in West Point. Then a photograph flashed on the screen, a grainy image of a man, one arm missing, standing amid a sea of corpses. Sergio froze, his chest tightening as he stared at the TV screen. Something about the photograph sent a wave of discomfort washing over him. The man in the image, battered, bloodied, and missing an arm, exuded an unnatural stillness that made Sergio's stomach churn. He didn't understand why, but deep down a sense of dread filled him, cold and absolute. Word West Point echoed in his mind, tugging at fragmented memories of smoke, chaos, and distant screams. The name felt heavy, demanding his attention. Sergio couldn't let it go, his thoughts looping endlessly as he replayed the photograph in his head, trying to make sense of it. Then a banging broke through like a hammer on glass, shattering his focus. Peering through the window that the banging was coming from, froze. On the other side stood a woman, her pale, lifeless eyes locked forward, staring into his soul. Time froze for Sergio as he fixated on her unnatural appearance. The blood-smeared skin, the dead stare, the erratic movements, they mirrored the haunting stillness of the man in the West Point photo. His mind raced, unable to let go of the connection, the images blurring together in a terrifying amalgamation. Snapping back to reality, he opened the door. He lunged and he shoved her back. When she hit the floor, he stomped on her head repeatedly until she stopped moving. Breathing heavily, Sergio glanced down at her belongings. Her clothes, a black plaid shirt and pants, caught his attention. The blue scrubs he wore felt wrong. The shirt irritated his eyes under the flickering fluorescent light. Even as more figures shuffled toward him, Sergio focused on changing his clothes, tugging the plaid shirt over his burned skin and stepping into the jeans. The sour stench clung to the fabric, making him gag, but it was better than the scrubs. The other intruders reached him, forcing him into his foot. Sergio fought them off with raw strength, his body moving mechanically as he shoved, struck, and stomped. When the room was clear, it was thick with the smell of death. The bodies were stinking up the place, and Sergio's stomach churned. He needed to move them. While searching the bodies, he thought he spotted a digital watch, something to tell the time, day, and temperature. It turned out to be useless, frustrating Sergio. When another figure appeared, Sergio lashed out. With his shoves powered by his rage, he released his irritation on the intruder with brutal force. With the hallway finally quiet, Sergio reinforced the barricades and stepped back, staring at the motionless bodies. The groaning, the banging, the smell. Oh God, the smell. It was unbearable, he said. Whatever they were, they trifled with every fiber of his being. A growing feeling deep within, a hatred for them that he couldn't explain, began to grow. For now, the intruder stayed away. The silence wasn't comforting, it was a warning. Sergio used the time to rebuild himself. His body was weak, but weakness wasn't an option. He rationed his fresh food carefully, prioritizing what would spoil first, knowing it was his best chance to regain strength. The TVs continued to flicker in the background, their broadcast sharpening his rusty reading skills. News reports painted an increasingly dire picture. The infected, as they called them, weren't just a local threat. They were spreading. Berlin, Tokyo, major cities falling one by one. But Sergio didn't trust the reports. Something about the tone, the carefully chosen words, felt wrong. His gut told him the truth was worse than what they admitted, or maybe it wasn't even close to what was actually happening. Occasionally, with faint banging echoed from the lower floors, a reminder that he wasn't truly alone. Yet none of the noise ever reached his room, leaving him unbothered but uneasy. By day 4, he felt stronger, a combination of food, fitness, and survival instinct pulling him forward. He decided it was time to venture downstairs. Testing the silence, Sergio called out into the empty halls. His voice echoed back at him, unnervingly loud in the stillness. He was certain it would draw them. After all, they had an uncanny ability to hear even the faintest of sounds. He even stared outside, and it made him even more uneasy as the parking lot was eerily empty. Stillness was not comforting. It was overwhelming, like something was lurking just beyond his senses. Since the entryways were too well barricaded to use, it forced Sergio to smash a second floor window. Sergio's first stop was a store below the hospital. He scavenged carefully, finding more food and supplies to keep going. Just as he let his guard down, another intruder appeared.
Hey bro, you got games on
Fight was shut out and even gifted Sergio equipment that he hesitantly put on. But it made one thing painfully clear: they were beginning to infiltrate the hospital. Later in the run, he accidentally stumbled into a small horde of them. He dispatched them easily, and he even became more confident after the exchange. Out of curiosity, he ducked into the security room, and Sergio found weapons and ammo, but his hands and bags were already full. Determined to find some control in the situation, Sergio decided it was time to find the car. Outside, the parking lot was a graveyard. Bodies lay broken around the gate. The sight turned the stomach, not from disgust, but from something deeper. Through chaos, there was senseless destruction. It grated on him like nails on glass. His knuckles grew white and his grip tightened on the wrench. This is war. With no luck in the parking lot, he moved to the highway, and his patience wearing thin, he achieved a rare victory. Wasted no time attaching a trailer to haul supplies, feeling a brief flicker of hope as he drove to scout for a better location. This is war, he repeated to himself. In the heat of the moment, those words had just been that, words. But now, they rang true. Everything about them pissed him off. Their stench, their intrusion, their constant moaning. Maybe I'm crazy, he thought. But I'll kill them all, every last one of them, for as long as I live. Upon attempting to find a suitable place for a beachhead, he arrived to a house alarm. The shrill noise grated on his nerves, and he imagined it attracting countless intruders his way. Yet strangely, only a few answered the call. Well, for now. Needing better weapons, Sergio made a detour to a hardware store. Later, while stepping into an office, inspiration struck. Using scavenged office dividers, he devised a two-layer barrier system. The intruders, relentless but mindless, climbed clumsily over the first barrier, exposing their heads as they struggled to reach him. With precision, Sergio struck them down, safely out of their reach. The setup worked so well that he dubbed it a kill box, and got the solution to their growing number. As he worked, he began thinking about what to call these intruders. The term felt too generic, too detached from the loathing he felt. Their stench, their shambling movements, it all disgusted him. Finally, he settled on a name: Stenchwalkers. Sergio had noticed the cozy crockpot before. Its warm colors and inviting name stood out, but the streets had been too dangerous to explore. Now, with the area somewhat clear, he finally saw its potential. However, the stairs were a liability, he believed. He thought that the stenchwalkers would find a way to climb it. Using a scavenged sledgehammer, Sergio tore them down. He dropped down sheet ropes from the windows from the second floor, as he had destroyed the stairs. It wasn't elegant, but he thought it would work. By day 7, the surrounding area was clear of stenchwalkers. But yeah, the Louisville episode will be a while. With the base secured and the nearby streets cleared, Sergio decided to move in deeper into the suburbs near the cozy crockpot. But before continuing his crusade, he needed to be prepared. Across the street sat a small gun store. Upon entering, he had hoped for a shotgun or a rifle, something familiar, something he could rely on. Instead, his search turned up a Daewoo K5 9mm pistol. It wasn't what he wanted, but the pistol did reassure him. It reassured him that if worse came to worse, that he knew how to operate it. The stenchwalkers were growing more numerous, their relentless presence testing Sergio's patience and resolve. He felt the creeping unease of their numbers increasing. Although a bit panicked, he decided it would be a good idea to study them. Back at the hospital, Sergio had learned about their bat-like hearing, how even the faintest sound could pull them in. He hadn't fully grasped the danger until now. Earlier that morning, a single strike inside a house echoed farther than he expected, pulling the whole neighborhood into the streets. That's how the horde had started. From dawn until dusk, Sergio fought. The small horde pushed him to his limits, testing his stamina and focus, but he adapted. He remembered the office encounter, forcing them to climb dividers that would expose their heads for quick and efficient strikes. Earlier, he had tried his luck with fences and they worked just as well. As the horde cleared, he managed to scavenge the houses nearby for food, weapons, materials, and it made the victory more sweet. But it didn't last. He spotted a small group and called out to them. As expected, they followed him. He went to dispatch a lone stenchwalker, but then he heard it, rustling, too close and too fast. Panicked, he turned and sprinted away. During the pursuit though, the thing that was chasing him had tripped and it hit the ground hard. Surprised that it lost its footing, Sergio prepared for it to get back up. As it closed the distance, Sergio smacked it, it fell down to the ground and delivered a final crushing blow. The encounter rattled him to his core. As he fought, he wondered if there were more like the one he had just fought now, ones that could sprint. Sergio would get his answer soon. By day 8, Sergio had eliminated 427 stenchwalkers. Each kill was tallied, a small point of pride that kept him moving forward. But as he unpacked his trailer, the weight of it all hit him. The runner from last night lingered in his mind, a reminder of how quickly everything could go wrong. He needed a distraction. As Sergio unpacked the supplies, he found the toy dinosaurs from the hospital. Their simple shapes and bright colors anchored him, a small spark of calm in a chaotic world. Inspired, he set to work rebuilding the restaurant.
Who pierde el día tras la montaña y se llena de sombras mi soledad.
Sergio made a trip to the local bar, scavenging everything he could: counters, stools, displays, and even an old bar tap. Every base of operations needs a bar, he thought to himself. Back at the cozy crockpot, he got to work. Counters and stools fit perfectly on the first floor, giving the place a little personality. It wasn't just about the drinks, though he admitted his tendency to indulge. It was about creating a space where he could unwind after each girly mission. As a final touch, Sergio placed the toy dinosaurs he'd taken from the hospital on the bar counter. Their absurdity felt right, a small splash of color against the grim backdrop of his war. The rhythm of labor stirred faint memories. His father's workshop, the smell of sawdust, Santiago, Chile, el toque de la guitarra. Details were blurred, but the act of building grounded him. Sergio turned his attention to the second floor, using salvaged wood and nails, and constructed a sturdy platform. His plan wasn't just about expanding the cozy crockpot, it was about strategy. He envisioned a sky bridge connecting the crockpot to the adjacent buildings, eventually extending to the roof of the nearby gas station. From there, he'd have a bird's eye view of the surrounding area, giving him an advantage in both scouting and defense. The third story would serve another purpose. Sergio began framing it out, planning for the day when the water supply would inevitably fail. Rain collectors would be installed here, feeding water into the sinks, bathtub, and washing machine below. It wasn't fancy, but it was practical, a vital step toward ensuring long-term survival. The next day, Sergio built relentlessly without any rust. It was cathartic. It made him feel safe that he was building a safe haven of sorts. As the building consumed the days and his mind, outside of his own world, Louisville was way more dangerous. But here he was safe. Small space, protected. He'd found a fleeting sense of control, and for now, that was enough. Week 3, Sergio felt a pull toward the stadium on the outskirts of Louisville. He wasn't sure why. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered hearing about it, broadcasts playing on hospital TVs during his first days awake, looping evacuation orders, so frequent he could say it verbatim. All citizens are to report to the Louisville Stadium. Do not bring infected. Remain calm. Help will come. Back then, he didn't pay it much mind though, but the message did stick. But now, with the streets eerily empty and Louisville heavy with silence, those words resurfaced. Was the stadium still standing? Did the evacuees make it out? Sergio reassured himself it was just for practical reasons. He was going to the stadium to find gear or weapons that might have been left behind. But the thought gnawed him deeper than he cared to admit. He didn't know why he wanted to see it. He wasn't going to save anyone. He wasn't looking for companionship. He wasn't trying to be a hero, or so he told himself. It was day 14 as he arrived at the stadium, and he was met with little resistance on the outskirts of the stadium. That could mean two things. The place was evacuated. The second, well, he didn't want to think about it. The first tent he entered though, the locker was full, with an abundance of weapons and ammo. It concerned him. It felt wrong. As he drove deeper into the area, stenchwalkers were clustered along the fences, their decayed hands clawing and banging against wood. They didn't even acknowledge him as he passed, their hollow gazes fixed on nothing but the fences. Man, these things really are stupid, he thought to himself. He went into another tent, finding a revolver. He tested his aim on the few stenchwalkers shuffling nearby. His shots rang true, and for a moment, he felt his confidence return. After his fun, he moved deeper into the stadium. And that's when he spotted it, a Benelli M4 shotgun, his favorite. Without hesitation, he dropped the M870 police shotgun he'd found in the suburbs a week before. The M4's weight felt perfect in his hands, and he knew exactly what to do. The first blast shattered the stadium's silence, and the horde descended. The horde became a pile of corpses, and as he walked away, he thought to himself, Louisville could be conquered. He thought that would be tested one last time. Sergio drove away from the stadium with the spoils of earlier, but distraction struck. Sergio saw a sheriff's car and decided he wanted to claim it for himself. Yet, he did not want to break the window to get it, so he started making bobby pins in the middle of Louisville, and at the time it seemed like a great idea. Until night fell. The earlier gunfire from within the stadium had drawn too much attention. A small horde in front of him, lurking but unaware of his presence. That's when one stepped into view. Sergio dealt with it swiftly, but the commotion, the horde followed. He tried to keep the sound of the fighting with the horde to a minimum, but the first runner reached him, its speed catching him off guard. Panic set in. He snapped back to reality, aimed, and shot. Perfect, just fucking perfect. Might as well light a goddamn flare while you're at it. The blast echoed through the streets, drawing more of them. Before long, half of Louisville was descending on his location. By some miracle, he survived. Yet, he wasn't relieved. The once eerily quiet and empty streets were now being occupied by the Stenchwalkers. Louisville was becoming unmanageable. It was time to go. Hey folks, Scotty here. Let's pause for a second because I know what you're thinking. How the hell did Sergio not get bitten? Well, great question. Turns out he only got scratched and at worst a laceration earlier. Here are the translations in Japanese. I had my game in Japanese for whatever reason. But yeah, no bites. He got lucky. Real lucky. The guy probably has the reflexes of a cat or dumb luck. You decide. Now, here's where things get even worse. Population of Stenchwalkers growing day by day. Also, remember the storm horde thing I mentioned earlier in the video? Yeah, Sergio has 23 days now to escape Louisville. Plenty of time, but let's see how well he prepares for that. Or else an endless horde will zone in on his location. Despite the encounter and the urgent need to leave Louisville, Sergio wasn't about to abandon the untouched stockpile at the stadium. High risk, high reward, that was the gamble. So, the next day he made 2 last desperate trips through the city, weaving through the rising number of stenchwalkers to gather whatever he could. Stupid? Absolutely. But for what? He wasn't sure anymore. While in the stadium, the power had went out for the first time. It was temporary, but it was a sign that society itself was collapsing. The second trip was a harsh reminder of how quickly things were spiraling out of control. The streets were overflowing, and the stenchwalkers weren't the only danger. The runners, Sergio's newly named Rothounds, were becoming more frequent. Their speed was unnerving, but it was their acute senses, sight, smell, hearing, that truly terrified him. Perfect name, but there was no satisfaction in it. Back at the cozy crockpot, Sergio unloaded his spoils into the basement, stacking ammo, gear, and weapons like a man clinging to control. But as he worked, the weight of it all pressed down against him. Most of it would have to be left behind anyway. The thought ate at him, but there was no alternative. On his final trip to the stadium, something caught his eye, a Humvee parked in the lot. Nearly pristine, it was still good to pass up. He hot-wired it with little trouble, the engine roaring to life, a sound that drew stenchwalkers like flies to a corpse. The horde came quickly, surging towards him from all directions. Sergio fought them off hammer in hand. But as the numbers grew, something inside him shifted. The anger, the resolve. They weren't there anymore. He didn't fight to win. He fought to survive. Finishing off the last of the horde, he climbed into the Humvee and drove away. The war, if it ever was won, no longer mattered. When Sergio returned to the cockpit, he climbed to the roof and reloaded his magazines, the weight of his supplies matching the weight in his chest. This place, it had been more than a base. It was his first real foothold, a haven carved out of the chaos, even built a bar for himself. Here, he had felt for the briefest time that maybe he could win. But the reality was unavoidable. The stenchwalkers were too many. The Rothounds were just as numerous. Louisville itself was far gone. He sat on the roof, looked out at the city, its once familiar streets now buried under swarms of the dead. All that effort, all for nothing. The silence was suffocating. Just him, his doubts, and the creepy reality that this war had been lost before it began. Tomorrow. I leave tomorrow. The words felt hollow in his head. Leaving the cozy crockpot wasn't just abandoning a base. It was admitting defeat. In the early morning of September, Sergio made his departure out of Louisville. Rather than risking the military checkpoint near the hospital where he'd awakened a month earlier, he took a different route, around the checkpoint's right side. Resistance was minimal. The few stenchwalkers in his path fell easily to his hand axe. Guns stayed holstered. Sergio knew better by now. The sound would only invite death. The sledgehammer he'd found in the first week proved invaluable, breaking through the wall and creating an escape route. As he crossed into the open world beyond, uncertainty gripped him. Louisville hadn't been home, Kentucky hadn't been home. He was a city boy, raised in Chicago after his family immigrated from Chile in '86. What was I doing here? The thought gnawed at him. Maybe it was tied to his past as a soldier. Maybe he had been deployed here. But the answers refused to surface. After waking in the hospital, battered and disoriented, Sergio had declared war on the stenchwalkers. They weren't just a nuisance, they were a challenge, an affront to his survival. I'm not stuck with them, they're stuck with me, he'd always tell himself. But Louisville wasn't just infested, it was drowning with the stenchwalkers. His resolve to conquer the city crumbled under the sheer weight of their numbers. As Sergio left, the sting of failure pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had worked tirelessly to make Louisville the starting point of his campaign, fortifying the cozy crockpot into a fragile sanctuary. It had been his refuge in a world gone mad. Now it was just another casualty of the chaos. As he drove away, he glanced at the empty streets behind them. All that effort, he thought bitterly, and it wasn't enough. It was when he crossed into another city that something ominous happened. He was sure it was another city considering the bridge that he avoided would indicate a different city, yet he was unfamiliar with this new area. But at the same time it felt very familiar, as if he had been here before. He tossed the thought aside as he drove deeper into the city. It too had fallen to the stenchwalkers, though not as numerous as Louisville, and he debated actually as to whether or not he should stay here. But then, the sign that he saw in his memories, it appeared. West Point. Panic now filled him. He did not know why, but a sudden urge to leave this place. It told him to leave now. Sergio raced towards the train tracks, heart pounding. The asphalt blurred under his wheels until a stenchwalker appeared in his path. He ran it down, the Humvee jolting violently as he nearly lost control. Ahead, a car crash blocked the road. Swearing, Sergio stopped short. The trees to his right made bypassing impossible. A small horde approached. Axe in hand, Sergio fought them off with practiced efficiency. He worked quickly, chopping down the nearby trees to clear the road, but the noise had drawn more stenchwalkers. More shadows emerged from the woods, the groaning chorus swelling. Another walker stumbled in front into view. It was too close, but Sergio didn't hesitate. He floored the gas pedal, pulling through it and speeding down the road. And he left this haunted city. Hey, Scotty here again. I promise these segments will be brief moving forward. And yes, the story's been grim, but don't worry, the memes are coming back soon. Let's recap though. Sergio survived a total of 18 days in Louisville before escaping. That's 13 days from the 30 days that he had. That's a lot of time to spare, but Sergio wouldn't have taken that decision if it wasn't for the encounter he had in the middle of Louisville. But now that he's escaped, the real challenge begins, the kill all stenchwalkers as he's calling them now. But he's defeated. What will reignite his bloodlust? Whether that motive is madness or resolve, only time will tell. The name West Point clung to Sergio like a curse. It wasn't just a place, it was a weight pressing down on his chest, suffocating and wrong. The sound of it rattled in his mind, dredging up fragments of memory he couldn't piece together. He'd been there before, he was sure of it. The familiarity was laced with dread, a tension that set his teeth on edge. The train station loomed like a forgotten tomb, solid walls, narrow entrances, and an oppressive silence. But after Louisville and West Point, Sergio welcomed it. He moved with grim precision, his axe rising and falling as stench walkers crumpled to the ground. Each swing felt heavier, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of futility. This wasn't survival, it was routine, a grim task to clear space. Inside, the place was no better. Dark, damp, stinking. The heavy air clung to him, thick and suffocating, as if it were settling in his lungs like smoke. Sergio scanned the empty space. He'd already cleared out the stragglers both inside and out, but that didn't ease his tension. He could still feel them. Out there, somewhere beyond the station walls. He couldn't see them, but he knew they were there. Their stench hung in the air, lingering like a storm waiting to break. He placed the bed in a corner, away from the windows, and stared at it. All I want is sleep, he thought. Sleep until this ends. Until I end. Yet, he couldn't rest. His food supplies were dangerously low, forcing him to head out. Then he realized it was quiet. Way too quiet. Louisville had been deafening in comparison, its streets alive with groans and screams. Here, it was worse. The silence felt heavy, as if they were waiting. What stood out was the air. It felt wrong. Sure, it always stank, but it stank more than usual. It was when his NVGs picked up movement. 3 stench walkers shuffling into view. Their slow, mindless gait pulled a sneer from Sergio's lips. The silence pressed against him like a rising tide, suffocating and inescapable. The words echoed in his head. He ran to his trailer, grabbing shotgun shells, without a second thought. Aimed and fired. 3 blasts tore through the night, shattering the silence. The echoes went far. Too far. For a moment, nothing moved. Then they came. Dawn, Sergio stood alone in a sea of corpses. The total tally, 3,394 dead. But he wasn't done yet. his body aching, he returned to the train station and passed out due to exhaustion. The Battle of the Outskirts, that's what he called it. 2 days of hell near the train station, his new home. Yet Sergio's bloodlust was not quenched. After waking up, he grabbed shotgun shells he had stored and made his way through the streets that he had fought them in. But the town was waiting. The first shot cracked the air like a whip. Then they came. First a trickle, then a flood. They poured from houses, alleys, and streets, crawling through windows. Then they merged into an amalgamation of rotten flesh. Ambush. The word echoed in his head. The shotgun barked again and again, blasting holes through the advancing tide, but made no dent. And then his M4 ran dry. He turned and bolted, boots pounding on the asphalt and then dirt. Into the woods. He didn't look back, didn't dare. Sergio emerged from the woods, filthy, shaking, but alive. The train station was ahead, dark and quiet against the evening sky. Relief hit him, sudden and disorienting, like a blade slipping between ribs. He was safe for now, but still, he couldn't stop moving. The horde screamed in his head, their numbers, their weight, their groaning chorus. Even in silence, they lingered, a haunting presence that refused to fade. He stepped back outside, his hands trembling. He needed something, anything to drown them out. Gripping the wood axe, Sergio began hacking at nearby trees with raw force, each strike echoing through the stillness. Logs piled up and soon he was sawing planks, the rhythmic motion grounding him. This place wasn't a tomb that he had envisioned when he arrived. Couldn't be. Unlike the crockpot, he wouldn't abandon it. This was now his home, and he would defend it. By sundown, the framework of the second floor sprawled over the roof, a skeleton of work in progress. Rough, unfinished, but it was enough. This wasn't just another stopgap like the crockpot had been. If the stenchwalkers came, he wouldn't run. He wouldn't abandon this place. He would stand. The night before had showed him that he was capable of dealing with their absurd numbers. But that resolve would be tested sooner than he expected. As he drifted off, the creak of the newly built frame above him seemed to whisper the promise of the fight to come. Sergio woke with a start. He didn't know why at first. His heart pounded, his breath tight. The silence felt wrong, heavier than before. Then he saw it. A horde. Smaller than the last, but still large enough to crush everything he'd built. were spilling from all directions surrounding the station, but he stood his ground. He was not scared anymore. The station held, for now. A mire, that's what Sergio called it. A black tide of stenchwalkers so vast it swallowed streets, blotting out any hope of quiet. But a mire wasn't something you handled with reckless abandon. He had learned that lesson during the Battle of the Outskirts. That night, he killed thousands, a feat that left him bloodied, exhausted, and if he was quite honest with himself, incredibly lucky. The stenchwalkers' sheer numbers should have overwhelmed him, but luck had carried him through. Surviving that night wasn't proof of his skill. It was a warning. If he continued to rely on brute force, he wouldn't make it much further. That's why now, he had no choice but to strategize. Sergio wasn't a strategist, not by any long shot, but he knew enough to adapt. The strategy he landed on was deceptively simple. He called it the quadrant sweep. Street by street, block by block, alley by alley, he would carve the town into manageable sections and clear each one with brutal precision, like a flame consuming dry brush. However, Sergio's shotgun ammo reservoirs were dangerously low. Other firearms, rifles chambered in 5.56 and 7.62, still had some reserves, but even they were dwindling. He had already begun dipping into his 7.62 stockpile, knowing it wouldn't last long if he relied on it too heavily. Every shot counted now, and each decision to fire carried weight. For now, the plan was clear: tackle Moldrog with melee weapons wherever possible. Axes, hammers, tools that wouldn't burn through precious ammo. Firearms would only be reserved for the most desperate moments, when melee wasn't an option. 2 military stations north of Moldrog offered hope. If he could reach them, they might replenish his stockpile, especially the shotgun shells he desperately needed. But the mire stood between him and those supplies, cutting off access to what he hoped would be an arsenal. If he could clear out even one street, it would be a start. It had to be. It was time to put the plan to the test. Sergio's first target was the quadrants closest to the train station, no more stragglers tailing him back to his home. The map marked a warehouse nearby, a potential gold mine for tools, seeds, or supplies. He grabbed the remainder shotgun ammo he had left, slung his gear, and set out. The first quadrant was unfortunately populated with them, but the earlier fighting had thrown them out. The second quadrant, however, was teeming with stench walkers. Sergio got to work. Zombies, that's what most people would call them, like in those old Romero movies. And the spinners? Sure, that was a name too, but simple. Didn't feel right. Not for those things, not for what they had become. By the time he reached the warehouse, he scanned the interior, tools, seeds, solar panels. With newfound momentum, he pushed deeper into Moldrog. Third quadrant, clear. The fourth, cleared. After clearing the area, Sergio wasted no time scouring the nearby buildings for supplies. Each find went back to the train station, feeding into growing projects he'd undertaken. The farm, a rudimentary solar panel system. They were far from finished, but that didn't matter. For the first time, Sergio had a vision of stability, a semblance of control in a world gone mad. What he had once envisioned as his tomb was now taking shape as his home, a fortress he was crafting piece by piece. The irony wasn't lost on him. While the world outside rotted and crumbled, he was rebuilding something, reshaping his corner of it into a reflection of the order he craved. On the second floor, newly built the week prior, he sat with an old guitar, his callous fingers fumbling over strings. The counter in his head read 17,409. He smirked at the absurdity of it. But he was sure of his count, dead sure. Still, he couldn't ignore the looming problem. Shotgun shells were running low, the M4 and the AK were reliable weapons, but the ammo was limited. He would need to conserve it, save it for when it mattered most. The military bases near Moldrog felt tantalizingly close, but they might as well have just been on the other side of the world. Progress in the train station, though, was steady. Sergio installed shelves now heavy with materials. He had renovated an outhouse with a bath and a toilet installed. More car batteries added to his solar array. Every improvement gave him a sliver of control over this little corner of hell. But days bled into weeks. He swept the same quadrants again and again, double checking for stragglers. To his frustration, they always returned. Are they messing with me? He shook his head. No, that was stupid. The mire had begun to thin, giving him a momentary sense of progress. But it wasn't long before something unusual caught his eye in the chaos. Amid the blackened mess of bodies, one stench walker stood out. It wore a balaclava, a heavy backpack that didn't match the gear he had seen on any other infected. Carrying the horde took priority. Kneeling down, he inspected the strange figure. No dog tags. This is strange, he muttered to himself. Tossing his doubts aside, Sergio moved on. Whatever the stench walker had been, it could wait. There were more important matters. Such as the gas station that he aimed to get to, hoping that it would be able to refuel his car and provide fuel for a generator. He needed to move deeper into town, and there awaited more trouble. As he pushed closer to the gas station, he found a seemingly pristine Chevalier in a parking lot. I'll grab you later. Fighting often dragged into the night, and today was no different.
Oh, fuck.
With the power still on, Sergio took advantage and filled up his Humvee. The fighting was worth it, but it was not over yet. He would move on to quadrants 7 and 8, with the climax of the fighting taking place here. It would be long and arduous. The mire was far larger than Sergio had anticipated. consuming the better part of a week as he fought to push back from the remaining half of town. A helicopter buzzed overhead at one point, providing fleeting assistance. He couldn't help but wonder how the military was still operational. Maybe he could reach out, if only he could remember the right frequency though. His time with the National Guard felt like a distant, fractured memory. His new mental tally though, 22,822 stench walkers eradicated. 1 month and 1 week survived. The ferocious battles to secure the gas station had tested every ounce of his resolve, but the fighting near the motel and storage rental areas pushed him even further. By the start of next week, Sergio decided it was time for some much needed R&R. But, as usual, peace didn't come easily. One morning, commotion from the woods near his rabbit traps caught his attention. Armed with a pistol, Sergio headed out cautiously. As he approached, he noticed what it was. There were survivors. They were taking his rabbits. Sergio didn't take any chances. He fired into their general direction. The groans of pain and final gasp confirmed his decision. He approached the bodies carefully, inspecting them. Police uniforms, plenty of food, and weapons. This wasn't desperation, this was preparation. An ambush, most likely. People never change. Even the law falls. The irony wasn't lost on him. Even if Sergio wanted to keep pushing himself though, the first snowfall would stop him from doing so. The weather made venturing too dangerous, forcing him to slow down. With no other choice, he focused on improving his base instead. Spent the next few days upgrading his solar array, rearranging his supplies, farming, adding more traps and checking them, and working on car wrecks to stave off his boredom. Restless as he always was, Sergio eventually broke his own rule and ventured out one night to retrieve the pristine Pontiac he'd spotted weeks ago. The car, though, was missing a wheel, and when he returned, it was far from pristine. It was in rough shape. But Sergio welcomed the challenge. Over the following days, he would restore it, piece by piece. The cold was frigid, and it worried him. His small farm struggled, and while his rabbit traps provided fresh food, he feared he might have to rely on canned meals again. The thought of eating cold corned beef straight from the can made him shudder. Despite tirelessly working on fortifying the base, Sergio returned to his war with renewed determination. By the end of November, his sights were set on clearing the remaining pockets of Moldrog. By early December, Sergio had made significant progress towards West Moldrog. He was in the final stretch. By December 24th, Christmas Eve, Sergio celebrated a hard-earned victory. The train station, once a forgotten relic, had become more than a fortress. It was now a home. His living quarters on the second floor doubled as a quiet retreat and a small bar. The ground floor served as a garage and a supply depot. Despite catching a cold, Sergio pressed on. Turning on his washing machine, he cleaned his gear, as well as taking a much-needed warm bath and slipping into bathrobes. Grateful for the electricity that powered these small comforts, he let himself relax for the first time in weeks. That night, with a cold beer in hand, he savored the rare moment of peace. But the next day, he was back into the fray. Before embarking though, Sergio had to enact the Second Amendment. With most of West Moldrog cleared, Sergio made one final push into the general area where a police station, a fire station, and a gun store were. Upon arriving, he was greeted by what remained of the firefighter department in Moldrog. Their clothing was tough to cut through, so Sergio used what he had of 9mm and 5.56 ammo. He was more open to using his firearms due to the proximity of the police station and gun store. He pulled up to the gas station and hooked up a generator to it, refilling his cans in his car while he was there. He checked the firefighter station for any weapons or tools that he could use. It was thoroughly scavenged though, so he found nothing. He also resupplied his ammo reserves that were dangerously low at the gun store and grabbed all the weapons he could. Also, on Christmas Eve, Sergio had constructed a skeleton of a basement. It'd be used to house most of his weapons and ammo, at least a surplus. Today, he fully fleshed it out and filled it as much as he could with the spoils of the gun store and police station. The next day, Sergio conducted one final super moldrog. This meant revisiting previously clear quadrants. A necessary part of the strategy. As he moved through familiar streets, he couldn't help but reminisce about the battles he fought here, but one seemed insurmountable enough at routine. On his map, he marked it boldly, moldrog, clear. Well, that was kind of a lie. Liar! Though the town was officially done, the military bases to the north and the train depot to the south still loomed. But he put that in the back of his mind. He had other plans today. Sergio turned his attention to the McCoy logging on the outskirts, searching for a semi-truck to pair with the trailer he'd spotted earlier. Luck favored him, a semi in decent condition, needing only a new tire and some minor repairs. Over the next few days, Sergio worked tirelessly to repair and restore the truck. Once it was fully operational, he would retrieve the trailer. With both in his possession, he could finally begin constructing his mobile base, a key step in establishing beachheads in towns he planned to tackle next. Hey guys, Scotty here again. I promise these interruptions won't happen so often going forward in the series, but unfortunately the clips of Sergio finding and fixing the trailer, they got corrupted. So yeah, that's on me. Anyways, back to our favorite schizophrenic Chilean. With the semi prepared and the trailer secured, he set his sights on the smaller of the two military bases. At this point, Sergio's mental tally of stenchwalkers reached 33,815. Conquering Moldrog had bolstered his confidence and sharpened his combat instincts. He set his sights on the smaller of the two military bases. The smaller military base offered little resistance, a mere appetizer to the chaos ahead.
Most of the base's gear was subpar, scraps left behind, likely scavenged by the military and their retreat or consumed during prior conflicts.
With the interior mostly serving as a place for Sergio to rest, Sergio also housed weapons and ammo inside if he cannot put it within the trader's cargo.
Nonetheless, he prepared himself to tackle the next base and slept.
When Sergio woke up, he drove to the next base.
The larger base was another story entirely. Sergio approached it with the same confidence of routine, misjudging the magnitude of what lay ahead. He parked the semi-trailer boldly at the base's threshold, a mistake he would soon regret.
He popped some rounds into the woods, with only a few rod hands responding to the call. Then a mire descended on him. He backed up to get some space. But he wasn't scared though. Not at all actually. Because this time, he was ready.
By the end, 36,130 had fallen. Sergio fought through the night, a relentless machine of survival, until exhaustion overtook him.
With the military base now cleared, Sergio began scavenging.
Heavy machine gun!
Sergio wasn't much for words to begin with, but the horde from last night, the one he fought to get inside the military base, was too much for him to deal with. The weight of it all had sunk in on him, but was eager to get his hands on all the gear and ammo inside the space.
Yes.
This is getting out of hand. Now there are 2 of them.
The spoils were staggering. 2 AA-12s, 3 miniguns, enough ammunition and gear to arm a battalion. It took 3 grueling trips to haul everything back to his base, but every sweat-soaked second had been worth it.
His next task brought him to a small warehouse northwest of Muldrog. It was a quick job, a final sweep to clear the last pockets of resistance. Finally, Sergio turned his attention to the train depot. He began his work cautiously, methodically. At first, the resistance was scant. Just a handful of them walking about. But as he ventured deeper into the depot, the numbers began to grow. The deeper he went, the more infested the place became. He switched to the shotgun as the situation escalated. The fight to clear the depot and its adjacent building stretched over 2 relentless days. Sergio didn't sleep, relying on coffee to keep himself going as he battled through the endless waves of stench walkers. When the last building was finally cleared, Sergio whispered, "It's done." Moldrog was finally conquered. Exhausted but victorious, he returned to the train station he carved into a fortress over the past few months. Allowing himself a well-earned day of rest, he took a moment to reflect as he cut his hair. He updated his mental tally, 35,460 stench walkers eradicated. For a fleeting moment, he allowed himself to feel human again. But rest could only last so long, and the next day he was already preparing for the next campaign, March Ridge and Oakdale University. To Sergio, these were just more towns to celebrate, another step in his solitary war. Yet what he didn't know was that this crusade would change him. What had been a selfish vendetta until now was about to transform into a war of purpose. Hey y'all, Scotty here. Before I finish the video, I want to apologize for the voiceovers being a bit weird at times. I got sick in the middle of recording, and also my mic software for some reason bugs out. Still trying to find out the issue of why it's bugging out, but I'm hoping it doesn't kill the vibe too much. Regardless, the start of the challenge has been quite fun. I've done this in the past before, but not with this level of difficulty up to like 100. And I've never spawned in Louisville, I've never spawned in the hospital in Louisville. And I've never made a YouTube video before, so this is my first time also making a YouTube video. So if there's anything you guys can say about my editing, please let me know. This is also my first time writing a story, so I'm hoping it's not too cheesy, nor that it's a crappy military sci-fi. I'm hoping it's not one of those two. I also want to thank Ricksdetrix, Slavic Bread, and Spudo for not only inspiring me to make this video, but also allowing me to use your videos in the intro. I'll tag them below if you guys do not already know them. A massive shout out to my friends who helped me refine my ideas and the story, as well as catch some issues with the early iterations of this video. The mod list and the OST will be in the description as well. Finally, thank you everyone for watching this video, and if you stuck till the end, I truly appreciate it. Let me know what you think about it, and subscribe because there is more to come. There are more chapters that I'm working on. But that's enough of me. Happy New Year, y'all, and I hope to see you on the next one. Stay safe, y'all.